We're doing it.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our council meeting for Monday, May the 13th. Before we get into our regular council agenda, we do have one returning item for committee of adjustments. So I will call that committee meeting to order at 6:30. This is an item returning from our meeting on April the 22nd. And it is to reconsider application number B24/01, which is a consent application for the property located at 616 Owen Sound Street. Purpose and effect of the application is to sever the property into two lots to be used for a semi-detached dwelling. The existing single detached dwelling is proposed to be demolished as part of that application. This application was reviewed and considered at our April 22nd meeting. And the decision of the committee at that point was to defer because three of our committee members were not in attendance and thought was that it was better to leave that decision to the complement of committee members. Our planner is back tonight, but I think it's going to provide sort of a high level view of what was discussed as well, probably some comments you received. It's important to point out that tonight's meeting is not a statutory public meeting, so we won't be receiving additional input comments from the public. So, Steve, if you can summarize some of what we heard. Those comments and submissions are also captured in minutes from that committee, which are part of the regular agenda as well. But if there are any questions of committee members after Steve's presentation, you can ask those to Steve. The applicants, I think, are online as well. If there are any questions of them, like that, we will see what the committee's decision is. So, Steve, with that, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and for the benefit of the members who weren't at the April 22nd meeting, I will just quickly go through a few slides that capture some of the information that was presented on the application at that time. It's a little bit more helpful with a few graphics. So that's one slide now. So next slide, please. Just to get the lay of the land, the first slide shows just the location of the subject property. And you can see the red dashed line in the middle represents the proposed severance. Right now, the property is occupied by a single detached dwelling that occupies most of the width of the property, but isn't very deep. And the proposal would be to demolish that existing dwelling and in its place construct a semi-detached dwelling to straddle that center lot line. Very similar to the property to the south. However, I would emphasize that the property to the south was a different applicant and a different contractor and builder at that time. This is a new application and it's not necessarily going to look the same in terms of the dwelling design. The next slide just shows the picture of the existing dwelling. It doesn't have any particular historical significance or heritage attributes that warrant protection under the official plan. The dwellings in the area are characteristic of the time period in which they were built, which is 50 to 60 years ago. There is a mix of single and two-story dwellings as well as split-level dwellings in the area. You can kind of see part of the taller two-story semi-detached dwelling on the left side of the screen. And on to the next slide. So this is the severance plan submitted by the applicant. As I mentioned, the dwelling will be attached in the middle, so one unit on either side of the line in the middle. The green area represents the retained land, and the red is the severed land. And both will be the same for all purposes, approximately 355 meters square, and the same frontage. And they would share a mutual driveway in the middle. I would just note as well that the rear yard setback at its closest point is 10.4 meters shown here, and upwards of 11.4 meters at the other end of the property versus the minimum, which is 7.5. And on the next slide, just a little bit more context of the area. So this slide wasn't included in the last meeting, but I added it here just to emphasize again that there is a mix of dwelling heights and styles and now types as well in the area. They are single detached historically in this area. And the lighter shade of orange is those existing single detached one-story or split level dwellings. Intermixed with those are some two-story dwellings, again, all built around the same time period, with exception to the semi-detached at 612 One Sound Street. And that's in the darker brown color. And the current proposal for another semi-detached to the north of that, which is outlined in red. Single and semi-detached generally go together fairly well. There's not much difference between them in that they generally sit on their own lot, each unit as well. They're semi-detached and attached on one side, but still have full access to the rear yard along one side. And in terms of the size of the dwelling, parking and other considerations, they're very similar to single detached. By no means is semi-detached a high density or even medium density dwelling type. That's more, we're talking about apartment buildings and that kind of thing, when we're getting to the high density definition. So the permitted uses of the R2 zone, which cover this entire block except for that southeast property where the market is, it's mixed use. Everything is R2, which permits, again, single and semi-detached on all of these properties with the same regulations. And the regulations are summarized on the next page. So different lot area requirements per unit for single and semi-detached. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. You could fit a semi-detached on a smaller lot because of the attached column wall. The key part is that the front yard setback, the rear yard setbacks, the side yards, and the covers requirements of the building are all the same. So whether it's single detached or semi-detached, you would expect to find that each property will have a building on it that will live within the same limits in terms of the coverage of the lot area, the height, and some of those items were concerns raised through the public meeting. But in fact, those are not things that the consent process can regulate. Those are already established regulations in the zoning bylaw. So for example, the community wouldn't be able to require 30% coverage on this property if the zoning bylaw allows 35%. Just to illustrate how the proposal conforms with the zoning bylaw and complies with the required requirements for semi-detached units. Again, the minimum lot area is 280 square meters, and the proposed severed lot as well as the retained are far above that, 355 square meters each. The frontage of the two lots is also larger than required by the bylaw, about 10.7 meters each, whereas 9 meters is required. The front yard is shown to be larger than required. They could build as close as 6 meters to the lot line at Sound Street, but the concept proposed is between 6.5 and 6.7 meters. The interior side yard is shown to be a little bit larger, but twice as large as required. But they could be as close as 1.2 meters. I mentioned the rear yard being larger than what is required, and they would look to potentially maximize the lot coverage, but that will be determined at the building permit stage. So just a few updates to the recommended conditions of approval. They're noted in red here. Pre-C, there were some concerns raised about some erosion and sediment runoff from the previous construction. So we made it clear here that the consent agreement, which is a small development agreement for the lots, would require details around the erosion and sediment controls to make sure that appropriate measures are taken to avoid runoff affecting the properties in the area. There were also concerns raised about some existing fencing along the back with the neighbor's property, and that it could be damaged during the construction or otherwise impacted. They will have to generally stay out of the rear boundary area because there are easements and an existing sanitary sewer back there. But in the event that some accidental damage or any kind of damage occurs to either the fencing or retaining walls along boundaries, the owner would be responsible to repair that. And then I just noted here that there were some concerns raised about rear yard privacy, and with the two-story dwelling and potentially coming back closer to the neighbors behind, there could be a bit of overlook into the rear yard. So part of the design review at the building permit stage into the consent agreement, we need to look at the opportunity for some plantings, maybe a hedge or cedars or something like that along the back. Only limitation to that is that they would have to kind of stay within the easement area so that they don't interfere with the sewer line and the bell line. Fencing is permitted, and if this neighbor wants to put in their own side yard fences, they can do that right through the easement as well. The rest of the conditions are standard, just pointing out that for all of these lots, there's that easement along the back, and that will be maintained going forward. I think there were some concerns generally with the continuation of infill lot severages based on the discussion with the committee. Over time, we are seeing those being taken up throughout town. The opportunities to do that on corner lots is starting to dwindle because many of the corner lots have already been severed. But this idea of taking an existing house down and replacing it with 2 units, I think we might start to see more of that, especially as existing housing stock starts to age. And the interest of buyers come in and buy an older 50 or 60-year-old home that's smaller and not as modern, may not be as strong as wanting to buy something that's newer construction. And as I mentioned, we do have a lot of zones throughout town that are both permitting single detached and semi-detached, so the opportunity is there to remove singles, put in semis. I just wanted to highlight that. That this has been a pattern for some time now. There's been a number of these done. Overall, I think it's been fairly successful, that we can learn from what has happened in some of the past ones. So I just highlighted 3 or 4 examples here. I think this one is about 5 to 10 years ago now. But on Victoria Street, you can see in the top image, there was an existing single detached home on the property, a very large property, and that builder came to us looking to build townhouses initially, and we worked with them to do semis, and you can see at the bottom image the result of that. Admin design guidelines were introduced as well to try and get some of the attributes of the existing home reflected in the new. So some of the roof lines attempt to reflect some of that. Overall, I think that's a fairly successful one. The tree cover is impacted and reduced, and it will take time for new tree plantings to start to provide the canopy that the old trees did. On the right-hand side of the slide, the top image is the before, just a rear yard infill lot severance to use a small dwelling in the back. That's on Mill Street. And again, I think that is a fairly successful example, pretty low impact in terms of the streetscape and the neighborhood. A couple more. So this is more applicable to the current scenario. You can see on the left-hand side, there was an existing single detached home, an older home, although not in very good shape on Victoria Street. And then the image below that shows how that detached property was severed to permit semi, and the resultant semi-detached. That same applicant did 612 Owen Sound Street, and you can see on the right-hand side the results of that work. It was a vacant lot, and they built the same, very similar semi-detached dwelling on that lot. In speaking with the current applicant, they do want to try to do a bit more of a improved design. This one does have a bit of a flat face and not a lot of material variance, and it doesn't give it as much of a curvy feel maybe as could be done. So we'll definitely be looking for that with the current application. And then finally, lastly, I think the image on the left, which is done by Metz Homes, is a good example of an infill lot severance. This is again a rear yard where a single detached was introduced on Jelly Street. And then on the right, again, another example of a small single detached dwelling. This is on Second Ave, just east of Owen Sound Street. In the rear yard, where there was room for creating a new water. So it's that kind of gentle intensification that we're trying to steer applicants towards and keep it reasonable for the scale of development in the neighborhood. A mix of singles and semis, 1 and 2 story. And in that regard, I think it's been reasonable. I know there have been some impacts, but we haven't received, a pattern of complaints or issues in response to these issues. There was a lot of resistance, though, I would say, at the time these applications were through in many cases. But overall, I think it turned out fairly well at the end. There's a bit more detail in my report in terms of specific concerns that were raised and the scope of municipal planning authority as it relates to, consent specifically and what we can regulate through that. Obviously, things like tenure, we cannot, like whether it's rental or not, and, even through the zoning bylaw, the province doesn't offer municipality that authority to dictate whether something is rented or occupied or outside, or whether, somebody buys properties like this, invests in them, turns around a rental unit or moves around so much for sale. That is something that's just allowed to occur in the free market. So I'll pause there and I'm happy to take any questions. There weren't any additional written comments that we received since the last meeting. But if there's any further comments or questions from the committee, happy to try and answer them.
Sure, yeah, sure.
Every time in those pictures, I see nice mature trees before the new buildings have gone up in several of those pictures. And when you see the new buildings, there's no trees or plants or anything at all that even when they're trying to get out, then it looks stark. Is there any way when we zone these things or give them permission to make sure that there's some form of, if you take a tree out, put a tree back?
Yes, that has been the basic requirement is if you remove one, you replant one. Now, initially, and you'll see in some of these images that were restricted to boulevard trees, so not private property trees. And the reason for that is there's no municipal tree cutting bylaw. So even if we require the one replacement on private property, it's kind of at the discretion of that owner and future owners whether they're actually going to keep that or not. But within the boulevards, within the town property, definitely they have to at least put one tree back if one is removed, and in some cases we require two back. They were hard to see in the images I gave because they were fairly soon after the trees were planted, but there are some small trees that will take time to grow. It is, as you get this intensification, it is an impact to the overall tree community because mature trees are often in the way of the building envelope, the driveway, the utilities, the service, and whatever it may be. And in some cases, I know some of the trees were impacted by the hydro lines as well, and had to come down and weren't in good shape. If council wants to get a little bit more rigorous about that, it would really take a private property tree cutting bylaw that would have to regulate that. So that we can have some more certainty or permit protests to start planting during the trees.
If then a follow-up question, this is CEO. Is there possibility at some point of investigating?
Very certainly, council wishes us to look into that, a private tree cutting bylaw. There are municipalities that have implemented them. There are those that have researched and chosen not to for a wide range of reasons. But certainly we can give you an overview of what a potential policy could look like without creating the bylaw, just a report, give direction. When you see the scope of what the impacts and what the opportunities are, whether you still wish staff to proceed with the job.
That would be interesting to see, especially in the back, some kind of.
Okay, at the last meeting, there was definitely concern about privacy from the tenants. Or sorry, the residents and owners to the west. Can we incorporate into the design guidelines some mature trees along there, not in the easement, thank you. But on their property to secure some privacy, and I mean, larger cedars would be like probably the optical block.
Yeah, and this very much relates to the other conversation we had about tree cutting and how much the municipality wants to get into the details of what happens on individual private property.
Yeah.
So through design guidelines, we can definitely write guidelines guidelines that would encourage that to be provided and maintained. Going one step further and making it a legal obligation under the agreement is a bit challenging because then the town would have, they have to basically take the owner to court or apply some kind of remedy to if they were ever removed. And so it's more like encouraging to integrate design and landscaping as they put hard and fast. You should all
I am in no way wanting to put us in between properties in a legal battle about trees, but I just,
Yeah.
the concern over privacy in terms of design criteria would be greatly appreciated. And beyond, because this is a two-story, two townhouses, that barrier should be trees and larger.
Yeah, so the recommendation would be to do it in that way, like basically a guideline that would become an attachment to the agreement, but it is more of an encouraging thing and for any of these owners to work together on appropriate privacy measures that they can mutually agree to. Because everybody, I think, prefers to have some privacy in their rear yard, no matter which way, which side of the fence you're on, so but it wouldn't go as far as stipulating that, you know, you have to, so the mandatory requirement.
So you spoke to that too, Steve, in your comments, that, you know, based on some of the comments, and concerns that were expressed in the 22nd, changed the conditions slightly.
Yeah, it's number G, and
Speaks specifically to consideration of landscape plantings for rear yard privacy, so.
Just before, Councilor Fegan, is there an opportunity to have a higher fence, even though there's some specific guidelines for how high a fence is to be?
Unfortunately, there's not because of the fence bylaw, like, though it can be.
There's no like, can I come in for a variance on that fence bylaw?
There is
Yeah.
that opportunity.
Okay.
That's the variance of the fence bylaw.
Okay.
I would also say, I think there's a little bit of discretion on fence offer, so what it does, bias or.
Right, on this.
Five fence.
Okay, so that could potentially be an option at least, in some way or form to create a little bit more privacy.
Yeah.
Okay.
so is it, sorry, just a follow-up, is it worth these parties getting together and having a conversation about the design guidelines in terms of working together? I mean, can we get some sort of a commitment from our designer to work with the other properties in the area to ensure that privacy is maintained?
We can request that and put it in guidelines, we can't necessarily force those.
No, I get that, but
The design guidelines and the consent agreement will be part of a public agenda, so people will be transparent with what it says and what it contains and concerned about it. It's not subject to public consultation requirements, so always see comments on it. There's just.
great, thanks. Stephen Fegan?
In regards to the tree bylaw, I understand that if you take a tree down, we gotta replace it with a tree. Perfect example would be when I moved to town 15 years ago, whatever it was, we moved into a new bill, and there was a young tree plant. It didn't survive. So I'm wondering, is there a way that we can request a more mature tree planting as a replacement based on, for example, if we have 100-year-old tree that we're cutting down, we have, rather than just a brand new plant, have something that's gonna be a lot more robust and has a better chance to survive.
Through a bylaw, you can, for private trees, for boulevard trees, we have, in the design criteria. Caliper size has been set at 75 millimeters, which sounds small, but we're actually, supervisors in particular, having trouble sourcing high volumes of that type of tree. But where it's a couple of boulevard trees, we always try to push them to get those largest that would fit in the growing space and easily can be transported reasonably. But the nursery stock available can let that, you know, mass quantities of trees there. So some subdivisions, for example, are having 50 or 60 trees. can't source 75 millimeter caliber trees. It's just not a size that nurseries stock.
Sure, okay, no, what you're referring to seems to be on Mass Bill, but for.
Yeah, the smaller ones,
For smaller ones, such as this, we're talking about a single lot,
yeah,
is there something that we can do to implement that maybe?
that's the goal for the minimum 5 larger.
Sorry. Okay, so my concerns stem a little bit more now towards the slope of or the grading of the current lot. So we did sort of discuss that a little bit at the last meeting, that there would likely need to be some form of retaining wall placed between the northern split lot and the actual property that is immediately adjacent to the north of that property. So I guess my concerns with this is retaining walls are guaranteed to fail eventually, right? Doesn't mean they're gonna happen in a year or whatever, but eventually it's likely that that retaining wall will start to show some wear and potentially fail. So my concern at that point stems, I mean, these guys have already built, they're done, they're gone, they've sold, maybe that person has sold, and then it starts to fail. And then the person says, well, this isn't my problem. This is your problem as to, to the neighbor to the north, or this is the town's problem. Because the town approved this specific lot, it approved this retaining wall, so I'm gonna now come after the town in order to fix this wall. So is there something we can sort of implement that make sure that that doesn't happen, that it stays, it's registered on title or something of that nature, that basically says the liability or the responsibility of this retaining wall transfers from owner to owner as the property is potentially sold. And that owner is notified of that as well, because we all know we don't read 50 pages of our, whatever we have to sign when we just want the keys to our new house. So I think it needs to be something that would be sort of legitimate, yeah, like it needs to be vetted by a lawyer or whatnot, and just make sure that it's in there that, every new owner is aware that that is their retaining wall and it is their responsibility, because I feel that it's not fair for the neighbor to the north, whether that neighbor sells and whatnot in the future, to then become responsible to helping maintain that retaining wall, and yet if it fails, their property is going to be damaged.
So we dealt with the same way in this, so agreements, the site plan agreements for larger developments. Once the developers completed all the site work, there are ongoing obligations that stay on title as part of that agreement. We haven't crossed the situation yet where one of these into lot services and the consent agreement has required a retaining wall or a large one that would be of concern.
Right.
So we try to avoid it as the first point of attack, with the grading. There is a small, like maybe 2 floors high, retaining wall. I think it is actually on property to the north through the driveway. Look, we're going to put another one in or need to on that interface, make sure it works, it's there.
Right.
But then also it's entirely on, this owner's side of the line. And then, the requirement in the consent agreement would be that, consent agreement to be registered on title.
Yeah.
If they are anyway, they would stay on title. In the event that it were to fail in the future, like that agreement defining on all future owners.
Okay.
Just like a subdivision agreement, unfortunately, the only people we can force to be notified about it is the first purchaser.
Right.
So we make them sign a purchaser acknowledgement that they read that agreement and that they are aware of their obligations. Beyond that, then property changes hands without us being able to get in between that process at the municipal level.
Okay.
So we have to then just hold that to the lawyers looking on title, see what's there and informing them of the obligations.
Right, okay.
But ultimately,
The
it
lawyer will
probably
do
wouldn't
that.
come up in that process unless there's something wrong.
Right.
Or at some point it starts to fail, then we can have the town lawyer search title and say, oh, there is an obligation, it's the owner's responsibility. Okay, that's.
Okay, because that's where I was kind of like, so yeah, it would be the lawyer's responsibility then, because like you said, it's on title, so let the new buyer know, hey, by the way, just wanna let you know this. And if they fail to do that, then it's kind of on them.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, good, I was just a little concerned with it. So, and then just a quick little comment as well, as I just wanted to thank the sort of the developer. I know I was a little hard on you guys at the last meeting, and I know I said I hate lot splitting, which I do, but I understand the importance of it, and I think, you know, we do need to give some credit where credit is due. They are staying within, they're not asking for any variances, you know, they are sort of staying within what our current zoning bylaws are, which is nice because we have seen in other instances where that's not the case. They want smaller rear yards, they want smaller front yards, they want smaller side yards. So I am, you know, appreciative of that. And I also just wanna say to, you know, those who would be upset about this, that, you know, us around council, we understand how you feel, and, you know, part of us or some of us may feel the exact same way. However, we have a responsibility to the taxpayers. And if we decline this, we know where it's going to go, and it's going to go to court. And because the developer has met all the requirements of our zoning bylaw, we are likely to lose. So that will be taking taxpayers' money to fight a case in court that we cannot win. So my responsibility as a council person is to avoid that. So there are decisions that we have to make that we may not love, but they are responsible.
I think it all comes back ultimately to Steve's sort of concluding comments that, you know, we have to be mindful of the scope of our municipal planning. Regardless of what we may feel personally about the aesthetic of a certain proposal, you know, we are limited in what we can and can't do in the role that we can do. So, any other questions, Steve? No, you certainly can. Question. Yes, I have a question. Yeah. I'll second the motions of the motions on the table. Go ahead.
It's kind of a comment and maybe a suggestion or recommendations for the contractors there, the builders. I do live in a semi in town. And I know how hard it would be if I didn't have a fence. So a 6-foot fence that structures around the property line improves it greatly. Like I can't see into my neighbor's lawn if I'm in my yard. I'll hop over the fence and do this, you know what I mean? So you can't see over a 6 unless you're 7 feet tall. But I would probably recommend a fence go in around the property line. That would help out a lot instead of trees. I'm just suggesting because trees are gonna take a long time to grow. Fence line is a lot better, it's a lot easier. I'll probably get more money for the property if we compare that to something anyways, fence backyard. So that's just a recommendation on my side because I do live in one. Windows. The only type of windows I can see into my neighbor's backyard are windows that I can't access anyways because of the bathtub in the way or there's something in the way, so you can't really see out the window. So when you're building your house on the inside, have that in mind, that if you can't get to the window to kind of peer into the neighbor's yards, you're not gonna see as much stuff anyway. So, and that's the way my place was constructed, like I can't see into my neighbor's yards from my back windows. Just the way stuff was put into the features of the house and stuff, so just my comment on it.
Okay. First-hand experience.
Absolutely.
We can't say
Could we actually just put up the slide that lists the conditions again? We'll just save 10 minutes of me reading through each condition. Yeah. So motion has been made by Bernardo, seconded by Mills, to approve the application based on the conditions which have been summarized there, which include the newly added conditions which are read, which were not part of the recommendation that we were considering on April 22nd. So motion's on the table. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay. All right, thank you, Steve. And that was the only matter for committee of adjustments. So late to adjourn that meeting by Vice Chair Hall, seconded by Member Keegan. All in favor? That's carried. So we'll call our regular council meeting to order at 7:05. And I would ask that if you're able, that you please stand and join us for the microphone. I'd like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that the town of Shelburne resides within the traditional territory and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, Chippewa, and the people of the Three Fires Confederacy. The traditional territories upon which we live, work, play, and learn are steeped in rich Indigenous history and traditions, and it is with this statement that we declare to honor and respect past and present connection of Indigenous peoples to this land, its waterways and resources. Just a standard reminder to members of their duty to declare any pecuniary interest that they may have in respect of any item on tonight's agenda. Those disclosures must be made verbally and in writing, which is filed with the clerk. On to our minutes from the previous meetings. Can I have a motion to adopt minutes from our regular meeting of council from April 22nd, as well as our committee of adjustment meeting of the same date by Councilor Bouchardy, Secretary James. Regular discussion on those. All right, so that takes us to a public question period. Are there any questions or members? Yes, sir.
I'm just curious as to how we decide where the money that we pay for taxes goes to, as far as trying to keep things quiet or actually fighting for the people of the town.
In what respect?
Well, we could spend our money and push back at the developers and the builders. Or because I pay taxes and people that were on the screen earlier don't. Or we can just pay other people money so they go away. And I just want to know how we decide that.
Yeah, I'm not entirely clear. I think I know where you're going with it. Our public budget process is a process that takes place every year. And that's how we allocate public funds. If you're referring specifically to planning policy, as I mentioned, as the planner mentioned, you know, we around this table have to abide by provincial planning policy. If there are aspects of that planning regime that you don't like in terms of what the aims are and intensification, that sort of thing, then probably advocacy efforts are better made at the provincial level where those policies are set. Beyond that, you know, we are sort of given a rule book, so to speak, that we have to live by and make decisions within. So, as I said, it's not always decisions that certain members of the public may like, may not always be decisions that individual members of the committee may like, but they are decisions that have to be made in accordance with provincial planning policy, which is in place at the time. And as member Wagner said, if we stray from those policies and making those decisions, it opens the town up, taxpayers ultimately, to fighting essentially legal battles which are lost causes. And we've actually seen that play out.
Yes.
Yes, could I just have your name for the record as well?
Adam Blunt.
If I may also add to your worship, not only that, the province, if it finds that we become very obstinate and go against their policies, will step in and take over. And it not have to pass, municipality. So your best bet is, as the mayor had suggested, at the provincial level, go see your FPP. And other than that, the vote and vote.
Any other questions from the public? Are there any questions submitted electronically?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, so we have a couple of presentations. The first presentation this evening is from our auditor, RLB, and Marie Short is joining us virtually. Take us through our audit financial statements, draft audit financial statements. Very welcome.
Correct. Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So thanks very much for the opportunity to present at this council meeting. I will be walking through the presentation found within the council package on pages 22 to 49. The draft audited financial statements follow that on pages 50 to 81. Because the presentation covers the main statements within the audited financial statements themselves, what I would propose to do is walk through the presentation, not separately through the financial statements, because I will be duplicating a lot of the information that's contained within the presentation. But then if there are questions specific to anything in the financial statements that are not in the presentation, then I'm happy to answer those and jump to those pages in the statements as necessary. So with that said, I will share my screen here. So thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation, as I said, and thank you to your finance department staff. Getting to this point where we are presenting the draft audited financial statements is done behind the scenes to the public, but certainly not behind the scenes to your finance staff. It is an onerous process going through an audit, so we do thank them for their diligence in getting us to this point where we are prepared to present the draft financial statements after the completion of our audit. Just in terms of a quick agenda, I'll talk a little bit about the audit itself and how things have gone. Brief comments on the audit report, and then walk through the financial statements or the main statements and some graphs that highlight some key metrics that we feel are particularly important, and then talk about next steps after today's presentation. So first off, in terms of our audit, materiality is a number that allows us to sign off on our audit report. So that is a number that's kind of important when we say that the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects. That materiality is the number that we're looking at. Conceptually, the sum of all of the misstatements that we might find in the audit could add up to that, and we could still sign off on our audit report. But with that said, we don't wind up with misstatements of any significance, and that's highlighted in the bullets below. We did provide a letter to council in the fall that highlighted some of the key elements of our audit plan. And so I can communicate that there were no changes to our audit plan from what was communicated in that letter, that basically the risk areas, the procedures, materiality, and all of the things that were communicated in that letter are consistent with what actually was the case when we performed our audit. We did not have any significant internal control deficiencies to communicate, no independence issues in terms of our independence from your financial results and from the municipality, and no concerns with our conduct of the audit in terms of our communications and dealings with management. As I said, we certainly thank your finance department for their good work. In terms of entries, they're the standard entries that we would expect to make as part of our audit, primarily related to tangible capital assets. So over the course of the year, your municipal staff or your finance staff is recording things based on the expenditures made to tie into your budgeting process and your internal reporting. At the end of the year, we make adjustments to that for financial statement purpose presentation so that we can present the financial statements as is. And that's the bulk of the entries made. Other than that, we do consolidate various subsidiary entities into the financial statements, and that's done at year end as well. So those are all very standard and what we would expect to have be the case in any audit year. In terms of our audit report, which is included within the draft audited financial statements in council's package, it is a clean audit opinion. It is presented in draft, subject to your review and approval today. But we have conducted our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and have come to the conclusion that based on our work, that the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with Canadian public accounting standards. So in terms of the statement of financial position, that's the first statement within the financial statements themselves. This highlights the financial assets at the top, the liabilities of the municipality, and then down at the bottom, the non-financial assets. The net of all of those things culminates in your accumulated surplus at the end of the year. So just showing that statement here, you can see total financial assets up by about $1.5 million, mostly related to your cash position being up about 1.2. In the liability section, down by about $1 million, basically repayment of long-term debt being the primary reason for that. And so your net financial assets are up to $8.33 million from about $5.83 the year before. So an increase of about $2.5 million increase in your net financial asset position. So that's kind of a strengthening of the liquidity of the municipality from 2022 to 2023. And then down at the bottom, we have the non-financial assets, most notably your tangible capital assets being all the roads and buildings and infrastructure that the municipality has, up to just over 81 million as a result of about 5.6 million spent on new capital asset additions, net of amortization of about 2.5 million. So in total, the accumulated surplus being the total equity for the municipality up to just under 90 million at the end of the year from 84 million at the end of the prior year. Primarily that accumulated surplus is your investment in tangible capital assets, and that has increased as a result of the expenditures in the year. So just walking through the first graph we have showing cash and cash equivalents. We do look at the town of Shelburne compared to the average of other municipal clients. So the green line is the town of Shelburne's cash position relative to its annual cash outflows. The blue line is the average of our other municipal clients. So what this says is that on average, compared to our other clients, you do hold more cash at the end of this year than the average of our other clients. We'll talk about reserves and reserve funds, but I do want to caution that this is one measure. It's no indication of what your cash needs might be going forward. And we will talk a bit about your reserves and reserve funds and the need for capital investment in the future. But your cash position relative to other municipalities is somewhat higher, not reflecting in any way or not necessarily an indication of what your needs would be going forward. Taxes receivable is another amount showing on the statement of financial position. The green line again being the town of Shelburne, and you can see that your taxes receivable has increased a fair amount over the last couple of years. That's not surprising. We are seeing that across other municipalities to a somewhat lesser extent. It seems that tax receivable across most, if not all of our municipal clients has increased in the last few years. In particular, though, I would comment that although it's at 9.5%, so that's 9.5% of all of the taxes that you collect over the course of the year for your own purposes, as well as for the county and the school board, 9% of that, 9.5% of that total is what you have in taxes receivable at the end of the year. It's still within the range that the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing would consider to be low risk, which is anything under 10%. So you are creeping up to that 10% level, but still under what they would consider to be low risk. So not a concern. And as I said, we are seeing taxes receivable creeping up across all of our municipal clients across our whole portfolio. So the next graph shows your capital asset additions as a percentage of total tax revenue. And we compare as a percentage of total tax revenue to try and normalize for the size of different municipalities. Arguably, a larger municipality with a higher tax revenues has more resources from tax revenues at least to spend on capital asset additions. So that's how we normalize for different sizes of municipalities. And you can see that your capital asset expenditures in the last 5 years have fluctuated kind of around the norm. Because we're averaging other municipalities, you'd see less fluctuation from year to year, because in some years, certain municipalities will spend more, certain municipalities will spend less. So you'd expect the blue line to be a little straighter, and that certainly is the case, but your expenditures tend to follow the same trend lines, and it does seem that you are spending fairly significantly on your capital assets as a way of maintaining your infrastructure. This graph shows capital asset additions in blue versus what you've budgeted to spend in green versus amortization in yellow. It's not surprising with most municipalities that the green line tends to be higher than the blue line. Most municipalities will budget to take on a fair amount of capital work in any given year. But as you know, projects sometimes don't follow the intended timelines and carry into following years. And so then if money is unspent in a budget year, it may be carried forward and be included in the capital budget for the following year. So what's included in green tends to cover those carry forwards. But what I tend to compare more significantly is the blue versus yellow lines. The blue being your actual expenditures, the yellow being your amortization. And you can see that in all the years from 2020 to 2023, the blue line is higher than the yellow one, meaning that you are spending more than amortization on your capital asset additions. Not a perfect measure, but it is a way of trying to understand how you're doing maintaining your infrastructure. And I think that's a good sign that you are spending more than the average wear and tear on your assets. This graph shows capital asset expenditures by funding source. Most of your expenditures this year coming from capital grants, reserves, and reserve funds. Not surprisingly, that tends to be the case in most of your fiscal years. So the next statement is the statement of operations showing revenues and expenses for the year compared to budget and compared to prior year. And this shows the change getting from the prior year's accumulated surplus to the current year's, coming as a result of a $5 million annual surplus. That $5 million annual surplus coming largely because of capital asset activity. And in fact, when we get to a future statement, we'll see that your general fund surplus is much smaller and transferred into a reserve. But this just shows the revenues and expenses in the year. In particular, comparing to budget, you can see that grant revenue is a fair amount below. Although you did spend fairly significantly on capital assets, you didn't spend as much as you budgeted, again, with projects being carried forward or not taking place in the year. And so some of the grants that were anticipated to cover some of the capital activity not received because the capital activity didn't progress as planned. So that's the main variance in terms of your revenue. You can see that most of the other revenues pretty consistent year over year. And so your revenues at 22 million, up fairly significantly from last year, but down from budget. And we see the same thing on the expenditures side. The expenditures at 16.7 million, under budget by about 1.2 million, but above last year by about 1.6. And that's where that $5 million surplus comes from, bringing the accumulated surplus up to 89.6 million. This chart just shows the expenses by department. It's pretty consistent with what we'd expect to see for your municipality, given the varied activities and different departments that you have. And this graph shows the same numbers, but over the 5-year period. And again, not surprisingly, kind of the largest departments, the most significant expenditures being in the protection, environmental, and transportation services. The statement of changes in net financial assets takes that annual surplus of 5.5 million and adjusts to back out the activity from your tangible capital assets to show the change in your net financial assets. So basically, although you did have a surplus of about 5.5 million, as I mentioned, about 3 million of that is attributable to your tangible capital assets. And about 2.5 is the increase in your net financial assets. In other words, your cash and other financial assets minus your liabilities did improve to the tune of about 2.5 million. So then we have the statement of cash flows, which shows the change in cash over the year. And what we see here is in very simple terms, without going into line by line, about halfway down, you see about $7.316 million. That's your cash flow from operating activity. So you'd expect to have positive cash flow from your operations. You're raising money in terms of taxes and other revenues. And that is intended to go towards your infrastructure investments, repayment of debt, and so on. So that is the case. You see $7.3 million of positive cash flow from operations. From that, then you're repaying debt to the tune of about $710,000 or $711,000. And you did have about $5.6 million of capital asset activity in terms of new additions. So the net of those things is an increase in cash of about 1.2 million. You're raising positive funds from your operations to pay down debt and capital, and the net of those things is an increase in cash of about 1.18 million. The schedule of accumulated surplus is Schedule 3 to the financial statements themselves. This shows the breakout of that equity of 89.6, or the accumulated surplus of $89.6 million. Most of that being your investment in tangible capital assets, not surprisingly. We do have other general fund surpluses and deficits for the library board, CDRC, the BIA, and the fire department, and then some unfunded liabilities for solid waste closure and post-closure and post-employment benefits. And then down below, we have reserves and reserve funds. So you can see about $17 million in reserves and reserve funds being a component of those that accumulated surplus as well. And down at the bottom here, we do show the note that the operating surplus on the year was just about $537,000 being transferred into reserves. Deferred revenue includes your obligatory reserve funds and other deferred items. So this is amounts that are not yet earned because they're revenues that will be spent in the future. Most notably your development charges, but also your gas tax funding. Development charges, you can see up by about $300,000. You did have significant contributions to development charges, but you also spent $2 million out of the development charges in the year. But with investment income within the investments that development charges are invested in, totaling almost $900,000, your development charges still increased on the year. So that's certainly very positive that the investment income was able to offset the difference between what you received in contributions less the revenue that you recognize in terms of spending out of the reserves, the development charges reserve fund. And so we wind up with your deferred revenue total $18.2 million, but your development charges being up somewhat and gas tax being down very slightly to $521,000. And so this last graph shows your reserves and reserve funds as a percentage of total tax revenue. And it would suggest that your reserves and reserve funds are more significantly funded than our other municipal clients. You can see the 372 or 373% as compared to 223% being the average for other municipal clients. My caution, and I will repeat it, I know I said it earlier, we as accountants, we look back. So we look at the status at December 31st, 2023. We don't look at what your needs are. And I know that there's concerns that the municipality does intend or at least that there's a water, wastewater, significant infrastructure investments that may be on the horizon and so on. So this is in no way to suggest that, you've overstocked your reserves and reserve funds. It's just a comparison of at a point in time, how much you have in those reserves and reserve funds relative to other municipalities. You have significant expenditures that may be on the horizon that others may not. Some of the others may as well, but it's really just a question of where your reserves and reserve funds are relative to your tax revenue, and not an indication of what your needs are versus other of our municipal clients. So I try to make that very clear when I make these presentations, because although you do have a fair amount more set aside in reserves and reserve funds, I understand that a fair amount of that is if not already spoken for, then there's intended uses for a fair amount of it. So in terms of next steps, by presenting this presentation and walking through the main statements this evening, we would hope for council to approve the draft financial statements at today's meeting. We would then get management to sign a representation letter, which is our post-audit letter that allows us to finalize our audit report, and that will allow us to have the financial information return submitted to the ministry in time for the May 31st deadline. And so with that, I am happy to answer any questions, and maybe I'll stop sharing so I can see people a little better here.
Thanks, Cory. Questions?
Sure.
Looks like you get off easy.
Right.
And I know you're booked to be Orangeville Council tonight as well, so that's probably a good thing as far as you're concerned. So can I have a motion then to receive and approve the 2023 draft financial statements from RLB as presented? Moved by Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Donato. Last chance. We're all in favor. Okay, thanks, Cory.
Great. Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Okay, so our next presentation is from Centerville Homes, and I think we have some representatives here tonight, so thanks for your patience while we work through the rest of that. Just for everybody else's benefit, that there is a report from our planner later in the agenda, which makes some recommendations and speaks to this. But I think you folks wanted an opportunity to sort of share some of your thoughts on it before we get to that point. So, yeah, I guess just have you stay where you're seated there. It's small enough that everybody can hear. Sure. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thanks, Mayor Mills, Deputy Mayor Hall, City Council, and Township staff. I'm Gary Pearson with Pearson Engineering. So we're the consultants for Centerville. Been working on this project for quite some time. We started probably about 40 years ago. And sometime in late 2022, Centerville was asked to replace a sanitary sewer. So I don't know if I can have the report on it. Is that possible? Just to kind of give some context. Sure. One just slide, go down to the picture that shows the design drawing. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. We're kind of trying to see up here again. So yeah, this is the development under construction, as most people know. There's a sanitary sewer from Centennial that comes over to this manhole here. It's an existing sewer. We don't tie into it. We don't need it for our development. Our development comes through and heads across from, we call it existing sanitary manhole 1. So in 2022, we were asked to replace the sewer, and Centerville obviously agreed to do it. There's a huge benefit in doing that before or after we're finished. And it was an older asbestos concrete sewer. So with that comes a lot of problems. Great idea to get it replaced. So they agreed to it. We did a contemplated change order to the tender. So we started tendering in 2023 and the design was done. We did a contemplated change order. I think we came in around 70,000, Steve, just over it. And at the time, we weren't super involved with the subdivision agreement, but we were somewhat involved. And so the contemplated change order was taken. I think they added 10% and said, okay, just under 80 grand, let's get that into the subdivision agreement. The one thing that we missed at that point is, if I had seen it, I probably would have said, can we make it an estimated and let's base this contribution based on actual tender and construction costs. So, what we're trying to establish here is kind of what's fair in this replacement. So, the tender came back in, instead of being 70, it was about 110,000. So there's a few things that are in play there. The asbestos concrete was way more expensive than what we thought it was. Things like, if they had to bypass the sewer while they're removing it, pump the flow over to the other manhole. We had estimated 10,000, it came in at 20. And then through COVID, a lot of unit prices crept up. We're seeing them come back down this year, but just the unit price of the sewer itself was pretty expensive. So the other thing that we missed is the tender came back in, it was awarded, and we should have come back to council and said, hey, it's 40 grand more than what we estimated at the contemplated change order time. We should have brought it back, but now we're into June of last year. It's busy season. There's a lot going on, and Centerville was kind of looking after a lot of the tender stuff internally. So we may have looked at it, but I don't think as a group, we kind of nailed it down and went, oh geez, that's more, we need to come back. So the construction happened in August, I believe, of last year. Jim, I think it was around late summer, and it went okay. There was a few things that concrete pipe kept breaking, so there was a lot of repairs. There's a service lateral here for this house that isn't on any as-built. So we thought it was coming out to Centennial, but it actually came in and connected to the sewer that we were replacing. So that was a cost. The big one was the sewer didn't have any bedding around it. So when you went down to get close to it, you couldn't see granular material. And the backfill was basically, it was 60 years old and it wasn't very well backfilled. So we weren't able to reuse the backfill in the trench. That caused additional costs. And then there's an old sanitary sewer going through the site, and it ends in our trench, and it was drawing water from the whole site into the trench. It was just a constant nuisance. So we kind of went from an estimated $70,000 ticket item to a tendered $110,000, and then there's additional fees to get us up over 180. So I kind of go back to the beginning of it. This isn't Centerville sewer. If you came back after we were finished and do it, we know it would be significantly more because of the road reconstruction and things like that. So we're asking for, the change in the fees. I know it's a big number. There's no doubt, but we try to document how we got there. And just realize that it's not really for Centerville, it's for the town. So, I don't know if there's much more to add to it. We know there's a fair amount of DCs, there's lots of building permits. We know this is a good development for the town. And we're just asking that between the contemplated change order in the winter of 2023 and then the final, executed construction works be recognized. We know your staff were out on site. I think they're happy with the work that was done. I think it was completed well, and there's a good end result. And I think what I saw today was the town's recommendation is to pay, I think, around 135. So that's about 50 short of the costs that we've identified associated with it. And we just, you know, from our point of view, you know, I think we did everything to kind of keep the costs within reason. And the 50,000 for Centerville, I mean, it's just, if they were connecting to it or something like that, maybe we could see how it would be reasonable, but, you know, we're just trying to be fair, so. I don't know if there's anything else, Caesar, I think that probably touches on most of it.
Pretty much touches on all of it, just. Thank you for giving us the time to speak tonight. It's definitely been a trying process, and we're happy where we're at. We're looking forward to moving ahead with construction of the homes this year. In terms of that, yes, we felt compelled at that time to do the work. We are not servicing contractors. We never deal with anything to do with municipal infrastructure. We just deal with what's inside our site. So for us, can I say, hindsight is 2020. If I knew what I know today, I probably would not have agreed to it, only because we're not of, that's not what our company does. But it's like anything else, the costs are important, but also to, what's fair. And at the end of the day, this was something that made a lot of sense at the time for the town. Made sense for us too, because we would not want at the end for you to come into our subdivision after it's completed to redo this. So it was a no-brainer for everybody, right? So looking at that, I would have handled definitely that part of the contract a lot different. So definitely moving forward, we know what not to do next time. Just to give you also a little bit of an update, as soon as we can finish this process, we can register the subdivision agreement. We've been working with the town, my construction manager, Joe, has been working with the building department, which they've been great. Our drawings have been pretty much almost approved. So our timeline is really to get in there this year, pay our development charges, our building permits, and start construction for at least 50% of the homes right away. So that's, if all goes well, we can get asphalt in within the next month and get our permits thereafter. We're hoping to have construction deliver these homes into 2025. Other than that, I'd like to thank you for your time. If you have any questions.
Okay, great, and thanks for providing that little update. I was gonna ask you about that anyway, so that's good. Any questions for Gary or Caesar at this point? Like I said, we're gonna move over to that report. I assume you gentlemen are gonna stick around for that anyways. To see what the decision of council is. So I mean, I will give a bit of leeway if the council has questions that come up after Steve's presentation for you folks. If there's nothing at this point, then can I just have a motion to receive the presentation? Mr. Sample, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hall. All in favor? Okay, the last item under public participation is just a proclamation for National Public Works Week. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Ontario. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without dedicated efforts of public works professionals, or engineers, managers, and employees from provincial and municipal governments and the private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. And whereas it is in the public interest for the residents, civic leaders, and children in Canada to gain knowledge of and to maintain progressive interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in the respective communities. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Mayor Wade Mills, on behalf of council, do hereby proclaim May 19th to the 25th, 2024 as National Public Works Week in the township. Council inquiries. I have a couple quick ones, but I'll put up first.
We're looking at you.
Everybody listen.
Must be another night. So the first one that I'll mention, last Thursday, there was some information shared on social media, where an individual had indicated that her dog had become ill after ingesting something from, I think what was described as piles of garbage at Phil Park. I wasn't tagged in the post, but apparently my name was mentioned and somebody was good enough to send it over to me so I can have a look. I did talk to town staff that day. I think staff went and took a look. I also took an opportunity that afternoon on my way to Ortonville for County Council to drive through the entire Fiddle Park. What I saw was a park that looked pretty darn pristine, to be honest with you. I didn't see any piles of garbage. The only thing that I did see in the absolute far southeast corner, where excess snow is I got piled over the winter. I mean, there was a little bit of residue on the grass from where snow was melted, but certainly nothing that I would describe as piles of garbage. So I don't know if that was the location that this individual was referring to. But I just didn't want the public under any sort of improper impression that there were piles of garbage in part of the staff weren't, collecting garbage, because that certainly was not the case, and I saw it with my own eyes. And the other thing that I think is important to remind all residents is that we do have a dog leash bylaw, so that there is an off-leash park within Fiddle Park that allows dog owners to allow their dogs to be off leash. The balance of the park is not included in that, so if they are walking dogs through that park, for the safety of their own dogs and other dogs and residents, please keep your dogs leashed. Staff cannot, in all fairness and in all reasonableness, make sure that, every square inch of that park is perfectly clean and that there may not be something somewhere. So, keep your dogs on a leash, except when they are in the off-leash dog park. I don't know if you want to add anything else, or Jim.
For yourself. We've captured most of it. We certainly acknowledge, as you just mentioned, that what we designate as the snow dump area for our needs in the town, as would be expected when the plows are removing debris in snow-covered boulevards, sometimes particularly on Wednesday, there may be other material from either composting, recycling, or even garbage that gets caught up in that removal. Similar to what you have indicated, staff and yourself have looked at that site, the pictures. We would call it a smattering of debris here and there made up of traditional garbage. But to your point, we certainly appreciate that it's important for a dog to be under the care and control of its human. And that would help alleviate any animal getting into interaction with any type of debris. But again, just to echo, it was little spots. We do have the pictures, so it might be a paper cut here, whatever. Should it be something that we're not aware of, we certainly empathize with that experience, but it's critical that that's recognized as abuse. And again, we can't stress enough that all of our residents that are users of our parks need to adhere to the requirement for keeping their pet on leash. It's not only for your protection, it's for the protection of the pet.
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
It's always possible as well that poisonous equipment live in any area due to critters, animals that people would like to get rid of, rats,
Yeah, I mean,
wildlife, and therefore it is absolutely essential that dogs are on leash, because they sometimes get into things that they shouldn't. And the other thing I want to stress is keeping a dog on leash, and why we have the leash thing is not only for dog protection. If I'm walking there and the dog should attack any other person, it could become quite an issue for the owner of the dog and the end, because there's liabilities involved. So a dog should be on leash. And not only that, I do walk a dog, it is on leash, it's a small dog, I don't want a big dog, taking my small dog and having a snack of it. So I would be positive.
No. And I mean, as Denise said, like it's terrible that the dog got sick from something. I just don't want, you know, a misunderstanding or misconception that Middle Park is, you know, somehow involved in some sort of garbage site, because that clearly is not the case. Second item is just a brief update for council. So as you'll know, county council some months ago adopted the master transportation plan. And as part of that plan, one of the primary objectives or priorities that were initiated is surrounding the need for a Shelburne truck bypass. Our county committee chairs met with our MPP a couple of weeks ago at Queens Park, and during that meeting, it was made clear to them that this is a great positive step forward, but that for MTO to consider this as any sort of provincial priority, they would need county to identify a preferred route and not just sort of broadly identify the need for a bypass. So that was brought back to county council last Thursday evening. And we had a discussion surrounding that. But ultimately, there has been a preferred route suggested by the consultants that prepared the master transportation plan. County staff is now recommending that preferred route be the one that be adopted by council and forwarded on to the province. There was an on-desk item that night, which was a resolution from the township of Amarin, which just requested a bit of a slowdown in terms of that process to allow for some further consultation with them, which is fine. There's been some offline discussions between myself, the mayor of Amarin, and the mayor of Langton, just to sort of see what those consultation meetings may look like. It is going to be back on the June agenda of county council. The comments I made that night is, yes, by all means, we're prepared to consult, chat, you know, work this further, but our willingness to do so is not open-ended. So there still has to be, you know, some timeline in place, and this is something that will move forward fairly quickly. So those consultation meetings, I think, will take place probably as far as it's identified as perhaps for council. And that is a comment that was supported by some of our colleagues in Orangeville. This isn't something that's just seen as a Shelburne problem. It's identified as a county-wide transportation issue that speak us. Short message, I guess, is momentum is still moving in the right direction, but in the interest of being a good neighbor, good municipal partner, we are going to have a few further discussions for the friends. So, well, yeah, I mean, again, let's not put the cart before the horse. I mean, you know, identifying a preferred route and actually seeing shovels in the ground and further being able to drive on a truck bypass, I think are three very distinct things. But the next step, which is, you know, immediately in our line of sight, is to identify that preferred route. Well, yes, yeah. Denise just reminded me, the Ontario Trucking Association, you know, is supportive of trucking, dedicated trucking routes in principle. I have taken the opportunity to speak to some of the companies which, you know, are responsible for a large volume of truck traffic moving through town. I think it goes without saying that they're supportive of this in principle. And one of the things which was indicated to me directly from one of those trucking companies, that it's not so much distance in terms of kilometers, it's a matter of time. So even though a dedicated truck route, you know, may ultimately add up to a longer distance in terms of you know, raw kilometers, if they're able to move from point A to point B in less time. And open engineering and stoplights and everything else, that's through they're gonna be well.
This area clearance from the something that's gotta be a sort of
Safety issue as well.
And it kind of strikes me as funny because that show, we had discussions many years ago, will be there many leaders to move traffic point A to point B as quickly as possible, which is exactly the same thing as what the trucking association is doing. So they should be very supportive of what we're trying to do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. That's understandable.
Just remembered one, sorry. I did do the dog counts, registered my dog. Yes, I did. So he has a tag. But it's not as easy as I thought it was going to be. It wants to upsell me on everything. I couldn't deselect stuff on the checkout screen. And it forced me to through it, so I deleted that and I went back through and tried to do it again. So it was a very lengthy process, I thought it was gonna be easier, but their upsell is crazy. The tag is being glow in the dark, reflective. There was something else about it.
They're coloring everything, because I went through that, not all of the same process, there are done, and they tried out something on the tag. That said, okay, and then on top of that, and you put through your visa, they are due for.
Yeah.
Yeah, additional charge on top of the
Additional
visa.
charges on there too, that's just like, oh, man, really?
Yeah.
So if you're using your visa, you can charge you a visa. So, process.
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yeah, thank you for that input. We do have a meeting with them this week to review a few other things as well. But those additional charges were noted in my report to council that there is
Oh, it was a small additional fee, I wasn't worried about it, because I got my tag, so. I can't
Thank
hear
you.
you.
If it's just the upsell process of going through, it's more the issue.
Exactly.
It's basically, all you want is a dog tag, you wanna get your dog tag, you don't want a fancy dog tag, I don't choose the dog tag, so what's the difference?
So yeah, so it wants to do a lot of upsell, and if you go to the checkout, it's not easy to delete the stuff you want to do, so I had to remove everything and start over again. Times to get the process. Along with that, I'm not sure, maybe I missed it somewhere, but people are under the understanding if they already purchased dog tape, because I'm a new dog owner in town, so I'm creating a new account. People are under the understanding, or maybe misconstrued, that because they already purchased dogs with their tags with their previous before document, they assume they had an account, and then it's flags for a phone number, and call this phone number, it also does ring. No one answers. So I'm not sure.
It would be beneficial if we could have those people reach out to me, because I need that information in order to discuss that with
Okay,
them.
I'll get that person to reach out to you.
Yeah.
For sure on that, so it wasn't the first time that I heard that comment, so,
That's the first time I'm hearing.
yeah.
Yeah.
On our, we did have an account, it didn't come up, but there was a lot of misinformation on the account. I guess they're gonna transfer it over, but your information. Yeah, our dog information, for example, had our old dog on it, that passed away, was still on the account. And we, and like I said, there's just, everything had to be corrected. So my wife had to correct a lot of the information on the account, make sure that it was properly. And she did it.
And this person didn't have any dogs, he had dogs. But they both passed, and he has a new dog now, but there's no information came up with the old dogs. So that's why he called them. So I'll tell him to reach out to you.
Yes, please. Yeah. That's good. If there's any more, please, we meet with them on Wednesday, so it would be nice to have that information. Nobody has reached out to the town to let us know that they're having issues.
They're I'm hearing, so, and I went through it, so I don't like being upsold, so. It's terrible.
Is it possible on our, somewhere on our Facebook page or website that if anyone's having issues with you, that to contact Somewhat at town hall, so that to give you the information of what their problems are.
Yes.
That might help as well, rather than them coming to us. Go direct to a person that can actually do something with it.
Yes.
Right, last call for inquiries. All right, okay, so we'll move on to our reports. The first report that's up is Steve's report regarding the request to revise the subdivision agreement for Centerville. So we've heard from those folks, and I'll let Steve walk through his report.
That's great. Yeah, I won't repeat what Samir and Gary had summarized. All of that is accurate, and that's how this has come to light. We knew we had some indications of this when we were here in March for the extension of the fuel. This gives an update on the subdivision agreement. This change was being requested and we didn't have the details yet. So that's why we're back. It's not just with the request from Centerville, but also we had committed coming back with this. So the subdivision agreement process has been a fairly lengthy one. A lot of back and forth, a lot of details to fine tune in the development. And the time to put this sewer in is absolutely now. That's what the engineers emphasized. However, as Centerville has summarized, it isn't specifically required for the development. It's just something that we are able to do. And once it's in, the current sewer that was there, or the sewer that was removed in place now, was there for 60+ years. This one should be that long again. Not a project that you have to do often, though it is growth related. So it is a sewer upsizing, and therefore it's a development charges item. And through the subdivision agreement negotiation, we just wanted to make sure that while it was clear that there was general agreement that the town would pay for the work, that wasn't a blank check, that we were trying to put some parameters around that to mitigate risks to the town that we don't know. No doubt a cheaper project to do it now because you're not taking roads or other things, but still not wanting it to be a large range of cost. So I reviewed the report that Pearson Engineering submitted for Centerville with the town's engineering consultant as well as Jim, and gone through each item in detail. And what my report does is just summarizes the relevant subdivision agreement, resurfacing agreement clauses. I won't go through all of that, but then it itemizes the 4 cost items that have increased since the original number was put into the subdivision agreement. So just to recap again, the original number was just short of 78,000. It was, based on the change order that Gary spoke to, but also kind of an estimate to check on that. SBA looked at the length of sewer, the unit cost, size of sewer, and added soft costs, design costs, as well as tax to that to come up with this number. And then after the subdivision agreement with the council for approval to ultimately be finalized and executed, we had been working with Centerville to try and confirm that number. And we had understood that it had been confirmed, but then as the work progressed after that point, there were really only verbal updates on site or in construction meetings from them. While we're encountering some things, there's been a bit of a cost and just kind of that standard protocol. Jim was saying, well, not our cost. And so we didn't have a chance to insert a process with council before the costs were fully formed. And certainly if the tender costs had come back to us, we would have been here almost a year ago and providing that information. The rest of the items, so that makes up about 40,000 of the increase. The rest of the items to make up the balance. In fairness, we do agree that those really could have been determined at that time. And so we are more open to those. I guess in our view is we understand the concern of agreeing to do it and bearing the cost, and then having a municipal sewer added into the project. It's otherwise pretty much all private work. And if a cost change, then that can stall with the construction process. So ultimately, what happened is that Centerville rightfully didn't want to delay their progress of works during construction season. And rather than pause and see if it was okay to bear these extra costs, they just continued. And that's fine, but the concern from my perspective is the benefit of that is reduced for Centerville. So there wasn't a benefit to carry on and not come to us with the additional cost request and make sure that was covered before the rest of the work was done. So there are some options identified in the report. The recommendation is really to give consideration to funding the extras that couldn't reasonably have been known. At the time the design work was done, the estimates were provided, the unsuitable fill, the connection to the adjoining property, some of the issues with the asbestos piping that was there. And so when we add up the cost of that and a fair assessment of reasonable soft costs, added to that, we get just shy of 137,000 is what we feel is a reasonable number for that. Again, that number should be well short of what it would cost the town to do it at some point in the future, when after the roads and everything are done. But the balance of the cost being the increase in the tender amount, since that wasn't shared with the town before the work proceeded and Centerville authorized it to go ahead. We really do see the benefit of that expedited work, wasn't for the town benefit. So we have outlined two other options, so we've called option one that staff recommendation of just shy of 137,000. The second one being no change to the subdivision agreement. Council could say back to Centerville, 78,000 is what we had put in there. You didn't object to it at the time that agreement was considered by council. That's the number. And then the third option would be to go as high as that's 188,000. So the option we're recommending is kind of right in the middle. The one thing I will note, have summarized in the report, just to be clear on this, at any time in the roadside city subdivision, the owner can appeal the conditions. So this isn't a specific condition comfortable, but the entering of the subdivision agreement is. So we could end up at the OLT, debating what the appropriate number is. Nobody wants that. It's going to cause huge delays, huge costs, and probably, very uncertain outcome. So we feel that the 137 is the most defensible and right number for the town. But again, the council has those two other options. It was low as the 78, which is already in the agreement, or it's high as the 188, which is what Centerville has identified. And we talked about this with Centerville representatives. We talked about this with SBA, CAO, Director of Financial Services, as well. And the one thing I want to emphasize is this is not like, depending on your decision, the next day the town writes a check. There's about 500,000 in wastewater related development charges that will come from this development. What we're talking about is the number that would be credited away from that. So they'll pay something less than that, depending on which of the three options. So there will still be a net increase in the development charge receipts from this development towards wastewater projects. The impact of the number, the choice, is it just leaves less money. The higher you go with the credit, the less money you have for all those other growth related wastewater projects that we don't have. So it is funded by development, 100% is still what we're recommending. So that's the good news. But depending on where you set this option, the amount left over for other growth related wastewater projects is a bit lower. So any questions on my report or for Centerville or for your training? Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Bernardo.
You can call it option one. And then
See the option one, which is the recommendation from the DC report, and then that's increase the DC credit essentially from 77,970 to 136,605, which Steve said, what's the difference? Second, but
moving in that direction, that goes there. Plus, the town and for the developer. As our planner has indicated, they move ahead because it was a benefit to them, that one, rather than consulting plus, and letting us know if there was an additional cost involved. But at the same time, it's not fair to them to carry all of the costs, and then there was issues in there. We have to bear some of that, so splitting it down somewhat, and fairness of it all. And with the recommendations, I feel comfortable with that, and I feel that at least, we're being fair to them as well. And hopefully, waiting for a long time, waiting to see something above ground there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for what it's worth, I mean, I feel good, sort of with that option. I mean, the do nothing option, I don't think is fair to you folks at all. The flip side, you know, us covering the full cost, and doesn't sit particularly well with me either. This one does recognize the fact that there is, you know, some mutual benefit on both sides. There's benefit in moving ahead expeditiously without people coming back and vetting all of those changes. The difference we're looking at is $50,000, I guess. If you can quantify that benefit, you know, hopefully that will bear it. In my day job, and it's kind of a mantra that, you know, the sign of a good settlement is that both sides walk away not fully pleased with the outcome, but, you know, that they can live with it. And I think this kind of captures that, you know, both sides are giving up a little bit to do the thing and recognizing the future benefits. So I'm good with that. And thank you for making it clear. Any further comments before I call the question? All in favor? Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is bylaw number 20-2024. Which is that page 109 of the agenda, and this is in relation to some recommended appointments to our Candidate Festival Committee, Shelter and Police Services Board, as well as the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Committee. So the names that, thanks Steve, the names that have been put forward and appear in bylaw are names that came from our appointments committee. Any discussion on that? Do any of you gentlemen want to discuss it at all?
We did look at all of the applicants, and in all honesty, I'd like to thank everyone that applied for these positions, but some of these people are very well qualified for what we're appointing for, and we had to go by the best qualified for the positions. And even though the one applicant does not live within the town, does work within the town, and has worked very hard on that committee, and we felt justified in that sense because of the hard work she's already doing, and being on the committee, that she should be appointed. Just felt fair. So that's the reason for that. We felt like that.
Okay, all right. Can I have a motion then for the reading and acting of that bylaw? Councilor Fegan, seconded by Councilor Shardy. All in favor? Carried. Okay, the second bylaw, which is at page 111, it sort of formalizes the resolution that we had at the last meeting to appoint Councilor Donato to the Police Services Board. Seconded by bylaw, Councilor Shardy, seconded by Mayor Hall. In favor? It's carried. All right, and last item under regular agenda section is a request from Dufferin County Multicultural Foundation to do a flag raising and proclamation for June 24th. I think that this one sort of mirrors what you've done in the past, where we split time between Pride and Multicultural Month, and sort of designate some time for each of them during the month of June. So somebody want to put forward. Okay, by Councilor Shardy, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hall. Any discussion on that? All in favor? It's carried. All right, any notices of motion for tonight? No, okay, okay.
Jump again.
That's not an issue. You have to be excited for a second. All right, on to communications then. Anything from that? Oh, here we go. Councilor Dean.
All right, number 10, please.
Yes.
So, and you got that one as well?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, sure. So number 10 is, sorry, correspondence from the NBCA. This was the last meeting that I was privy to. There was a motion put forward at the NBCA that the NBCA did decide to carry forward in regards to the PHO, which is the Public Health Ontario. Where they are, the Ontario Auditor General's value for money audit of PHO, in conjunction with the Ontario Ministry of Health. They are recommending to begin a gradual discontinuance of free private drinking water testing. So as the CA, which we use, we get the NCA being the Conservation Authority. One of the biggest things that you've all seen from Washington moves as the worst case scenario, where if we do not have water testing, we have significant chance of gastrointestinal disease and other issues. So the motion that's put forward by the Valley Conservation Authority, I would like us as the council to put forward something that is very similar. Not only in support for the Conservation Authority, but also in support of our neighbors as well as within town. We want to push the Ontario government to not discontinue free testing. It's drastically important in my mind. It's something that everybody should have their water tested, but if we start making them pay for it, likelihood is it's not going to be done. So having it as a free water testing is something that is more likely to be done on a regular basis and something that I think should be supported.
That's right, exactly that question, that I also would like to speak a little bit on. It's, in my mind, I know we do have some private wells within town. And, even though we may be hooked up to the, town water supply, people still use their private wells for big things as well. My feelings is this is again another form of, I will say downloading to the private citizen in a sense of the province where they discontinue it, it is a health concern. Where they discontinue this, and that's why I'm going to second this motion, which is more to support. But beyond that, I'd like to see not only go to our surrounding municipalities, I'd like to see it go out beyond that to all municipalities, as a motion, as well as our NPP, and to the Minister of Health, the Minister of Health, but also the Minister of Parks and like Parks and Recreation, Agriculture, yeah, whatever it is, type of it's fine. That's good, all this, yeah, that's not very. So, it's just the right thing to do for people, and I don't understand why the province would want to stop this particular form of testing for the people.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy to support that, because I think there are other areas where cost savings might be recognized. So, my understanding is NBCA, I mean, it wasn't a resolution or anything, it was a letter that they sent, so I guess.
It wasn't a resolution.
Okay.
It was actually a motion, it was a resolution.
Okay, so we'll support the position, I guess, of NBCA to advocate, to continue.
I've actually got a motion for yours, mine. So, motion that I've written is, whereas private water systems, example wells, are not protected through legislative requirements of the Safe Drinking Water Act of 2002 and the Clean Water Act of 2006, but are more likely to contribute to cases of gastrointestinal illnesses than municipal systems. And whereas the 2023 Ontario Auditor General's Value for Money Audit of Public Health Ontario, PHO, recommended that PHO, in conjunction with the Ontario Ministry of Health, begin a gradual discontinuance of free private drinking water testing. And whereas in the county of Dufferin, many households do not receive water from municipal systems, with many relying on private drinking water systems, including wells. And whereas the Walkerton Inquiry Report Part 2 concluded the privatization of laboratory testing of drinking water samples contributed directly to the E. coli outbreak in Walkerton, Ontario, in May 2000. And whereas all Ontarians deserve safe, clean water, free well water testing is a way to help ensure that residents on private wells continue to have barrier-free access to well water testing. Therefore, be it resolved, the town of Shelburne call on the province to not phase out free well water testing as part of the proposed streamlining efforts of public health laboratory operations of the province. And further that, this resolution be circulated to the Honorable Sylvia Jones, Minister of Health, Honorable Lisa Thompson, Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, Honorable Andrea Kanjan, Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, local MPPs, all municipalities, the County of Dufferin, and Conservation's Ontario and Ontario's Conservation.
Councilor Bernardo, second that. Okay. Did you read it? Okay, perfect. So I was gonna say, either send it along electronically or give staff a copy, just so they don't have to go back and watch the video.
Or usually, but not if you don't want to.
It's not as slow. Okay, no, that's good. Any discussion on that? All in favor? Carried. Okay. Councilor Bernardo, I saw your hand up.
Actually, I'm pretty big overweight. Number 11, the correspondence from the city of Peterborough, read the jurisdiction of the Ontario Ombudsman to keep council better informed on his finding. I would like to support the city of Peterborough's motion. I think that that's very important that council does better informed on those findings that we haven't been done with. So if I can have someone second. Support that.
Okay, Councilor Shardy. Okay, any discussion on that one? Favor? It's carried.
Number 12 is about the St. Charles, very helpful food insecurity support for their motion. We see the rising need for that constantly, especially our food banks and with our economy the way it's going today. I'd like to support that motion and who supported that motion as well. Guys, have someone who will second that one.
Look like Councilor Shardy is going to do the same thing. Okay. Discussion on that one. Gary?
Support the town of Smith Falls regarding basic income. I feel that going along with number 12, if you don't have enough money, where the trouble comes in with food insecurity. And so they sort of fall hand in glove, and I'd like to perhaps support that motion as well. So we'll second that one.
Okay, second on that one.
And you're not.
most certainly will, if it wasn't on my list.
Okay, second by Councilor Shardy again. Discussion on that one. Favor? Opposed? Okay, carried.
And number 15, support the Western Morton's motion regarding the need to support small business enterprise funding. Without our small enterprise being funded properly, staff and support, that's where our young entrepreneurs come out, and that's where we get businesses moving along. So I'd like to support their motion.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, discussion on that one, all in favor? Security as well,
And.
not keeping up with these.
I was not motion, but I'd like to bring forward number 14 to have some consultations and changes in bill 105, read the following charges and how it's going to support us when we start our growth process again, if we ever get an expansion on our sewage treatment plant. I think that this is the province is finally going somewhat in the right direction. I hope we keep going in the right direction and restore the development charge they took away from us. So I'd just like to bring that to council's attention. And that's it. I'm done.
So you haven't left much on there, right?
I did find one. It's just a letter, just some acknowledgement to Steve Mertz, Farm Producer Service, so number 8. We've met all the requirements for the province in terms of our emergency management services. And just kudos to him and please send something, the letter it's please appreciate from the council saying appreciate them.
I'll see him next Thursday.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was on the side from 10 as well.
Okay, anything else? No, okay, can I have a motion then to receive the few remaining items, the remaining items? Deputy Mayor Hall. Council Sample. All in favor? Carried. Okay. All right. Closed session, we had deferred from the last meeting because there were some members away, so we will move over to that. And the motion to move into closed session in accordance with section 239 sub 2 sub E of the Municipal Act to discuss personal matters of identifiable individuals, individuals employees. Councilor Fegan, second by Councilor Otto, all in favor? That's carried. Let's give staff a minute to